It's a little late for Halloween, but a number of networks are rising from the grave. We'll look into it.
Hey Matt, I hear you have a story about some dormant networks that just came alive.
Yeah, this is interesting. So, Spam House and a couple other organizations noticed over the span of a couple days last week that a bunch of different networks uh, that had previously been dormant were coming alive. People were announcing routes for them. Um, and it's not that the creation of a new network that's suddenly routable is necessarily a bad thing. But this seemed to be some sort of weird coordinated behavior. Um, so 52 different networks. Um, so to break it down, the big version is 230,000 IP addresses that previously weren't really usable are now suddenly, routable on the internet. Um, all of which came online in the span of a few days. None of which had real relationships to the ASs that were announcing them. All of which seem to be physically hosted in the New York City area, based on timing and traceroute. Um, all of which the routes were being advertised through Ukrainian autonomous networks and all attached to major backbones. So that by itself set off a lot of alarm bells. Like something funny is going on because these were supposed to be dead networks, and all of a sudden someone's announcing routes. So fraudsters have done this sort of thing for a while, where they'll take a swath of IP space that no one is using at the moment, and then sort of hijack it, sort of steal it, and say we
Hmm.
have the route to that network. And because no one really owns it, like it's kind of like ambiguous. Like they can use it for other stuff, even though they don't have the rights to do that. And you see a lot of weird fraud and spam stuff occur in those ranges.
Right.
So, Spam House decided, because this looked super sketchy, that they were going to put it on their drop list, which is the don't route or peer list that a lot of networks abide by, and say, if Spam House says these guys are operating some sort of rogue network that's most likely going to be used for fraud, we're just not going to route the traffic for it. Um, as of December 1st, a bunch of the backbones organizations, Telia, Hurricane Electric, some names that might be familiar if you're into the big
Sure.
internet iron, um, have decided also to not route them. So basically, these networks are shut down again. But it's interesting to see this sort of stuff, because as how do I say this? It's one of those sort of things about the internet that's kind of, unless you're involved in the operations day to day of how networks peer with each other and route traffic for each other, it's something that's not really on people's minds, that like you could fake a route to a part of the internet, claim it as your own, and then traffic, if people
Right.
trust what you say you have a route for, traffic can go there. So like even if big company A's domain points to 1.1.1.1, that should route to the right network. But if someone says, "Hey, I've got this route for it that's faster," and it doesn't actually go where it's supposed to go. Like there's
Right.
weird things you can do in the routing to redirect traffic. Um,
Right.
so that's
I
why
know.
this
I
stuff is done.
know.
Go ahead.
I know some nation states have done that in the past, hijacking certain space and then pointing some really popular sites to them, so that they can kind of be in the middle and look at the traffic in the middle, and then also, I know that I know for click fraud they do this type of hijacking quite often, right?
Mhm.
Because I feel because I think they when the clicks emanate out of the United States or the United Kingdom, I guess they get paid a higher rate for those clicks, and I know a lot of times they have infected machines with bots that are automatically clicking on these in the background where the user doesn't even know. So if that's the case and these clicks are coming from the U.S., they'll be getting paid more money for them. So maybe that's another avenue that this situation is being used for.
Yeah, could be. I mean, it sounds like folks took the right actions here and took these networks down
Right.
before there was any sort of impact. Um, but I don't know for sure. I mean, I know what the Spam House article has told me about it. So who knows what the impact was at this point?
Right. And we also, we probably the major ISPs, have done their due diligence, but we probably can't say that for all of the ISPs out there, right? So
Sure.
chances are this will probably impact someone at some point.
Yeah. Well, it's also weird to think that, this was caught because it happened all at once, practically.
All of a
Not
sudden,
exactly at the
right?
exact same moment, but like this sort of stuff doesn't just spontaneously occur all the time. So like this was a
Right.
definite outlier. They caught it. They noticed what was going on and said, let's proactively shut this out until we can figure out what the heck's going on. Um, that doesn't always happen. You might actually
Right.
have a rogue network spin up, in one small corner of the internet and not get, noticed until fraud actually occurs coming from that IP space. So,
Right. Right.
Yeah, it's not uncommon certain domains and IPs to come back from time to time, but they're a very small number. I think it's interesting because it got the attention because of the huge number of thousands of domains and came up. But I think it's just talking out loud. If some fraudster wants to do some nefarious activities like Manish is alluding, like a click fraud, maybe BJP hijacking, someone wouldn't be turning up so many domains at the same time. Probably they will do with a small set of members and do it. I think Spam House is still investigating what is the root cause, and probably we will know more details. But it's really interesting to see because the whole DNS and BGP is based on trusting, right? You trust your peers and the networking. It comes to the question, I think trust needs to be at the foremost thing. I think it's one of the classic examples. If trust is being misused, you may see erroneous results.
sure.
But actually, it's really interesting to see so many domains came up with just maybe 52 ranges, 52 IP ranges, right?
It's IP addresses, not necessarily domains. Although I imagine, if fraud were to be perpetrated in those networks, that some domains were probably registered. But I think it was just the advertisement of this IP space that had not been used in a very long time.
Yeah.
And if this does eventually, comes back to a fraudster trying to do this, I'm assuming they'll be smarter the next time around and not, turn up so many in one big shot. So, it's still something that we need to be aware of in the future, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
That is all. I think every time BZP hijacking is not easy to detect for even the bigger organizations, even the dissolvers, all this stuff. I think it's another classic example what it will cause if it's done in a huge number of things. And I think the whole industry is trying to figure it out at this time how to detect. As Manish said, I think even if it is a smaller number, there should be some ways to detect it.
Right. But I think, Matt, what you mentioned earlier about the, this type of things happens all the time. And usually a lot of times it's some sort of misconfiguration or something like that, right? But, it's just clearly an attempt at doing something, whether it's fraud or not, we still don't know. But I think ultimately what happens is, like kind of what Ganesh is saying, we should really need to be able to try to detect this type of stuff better. But I think the problem here is that there's so many organizations and individuals that they're not aware of how DNS and BGP really works, right? It's pretty, if that's not your wheelhouse, it's not something that's easy to understand. You can understand that at a basic level, but the real details of how the internet works is pretty, it's pretty complicated for most people. And I think that kind of makes really detecting this type of thing and being trying to get ahead of it, pretty difficult to do.
Yeah. You say for most people, I think even some of the guys on this team, including myself, struggle with it sometimes.
Correct. Right.
Just either wrapping our heads around it or the specific technical details of why things behave the way they do. It's gonna be a struggle,
Right.
It's good that we have people who really understand this stuff, who can manage it and understand why you might not want to peer with one network over another, or what the mechanisms of fraud are, so that you can spot this stuff coming a mile away.